Professor Tommy Coe to say a few words by way of an opening address. Tommy Coe, as you all know, very well-known international lawyer, a diplomat, and in some ways, I think, one of the most visible of Singapore's public intellectuals. Oh dear, that was a Freudian slip, wasn't it? Sorry. Tommy very gracefully wrote a very nicely attuned foreword to the book, in which he bewailed the problems of being a number two, especially to a larger-than-life character as Sir Stamford Raffles was. A little anecdote, we were once friendly adversaries because I worked on the Malaysian Attorney General's research team during the very famous Pulau Batu Putih, or what you prefer to call the Pedro Branca case. And of course, he famously was batting for Singapore. But we'll bury the hatchet, shall we? At least for this evening. Please give a very warm welcome to Professor Tommy Coe.
Very pleased to have Gareth Richards as our Master of Ceremony, and I want to call him Singapore's gift to Penang. Penang has given us many of the talented sons and daughters, and it's only fair that we give Penang some of our talented sons and daughters. Gareth, you were not wrong to refer to me as a Malaysian.
Yes.
Because for 2 years, from 1963 to 1965, I was a Malaysian. And you had not expelled us in 65, you might still be in Malaysia. I'm not sure about bringing to closure the dispute over Pulau Batu Putih Pedro Branca, because as you know, in February this year, the Malaysian government made an application to the International Court of Justice under Article 61 of the Statute of the Court to revise its 2008 judgment. Anyway, that's another matter. What I want to do is to begin by thanking our host for allowing us to be here in this historic building. I want to mention three of my friends, Iskandar. Where's Iskandar sitting? Iskandar, Daniel, and Sharon from the National Museum for hosting us and allowing us to use the museum to launch this important book. And as Gareth said, it's appropriate to be here because we have two legacies of William Farquhar in the building. I want to also congratulate Nadia for writing a very good book. I'm an admirer of Nadia. You may not know this, but I was very impressed by your first book on the Armenians in Malaysia and Singapore. I think the title of the book, Respected Citizens, which I bought at my own cost and given to Armenian friends from other countries. And I also like the book that you wrote on our national flower. The vendor is Joachim, pointing out that the folklore that Agnes had discovered this orchid in her garden was not true. It was actually a hybrid. So this is your third book. I thank the two publishers, Marcus and Keith, for publishing this important book. I want to single out a few people in the audience who have made contributions to Farquhar and the research at Farquhar. Dr. Kevin Tan, who's a very well-known legal historian, had curated a very good... Kevin, can you stand up? Kevin had curated a very good exhibition a few years ago at the National Library on William Farquhar and his descendants. I want to also introduce another good friend, John Suk Wai from the Straits Times. Suk Wai, could you stand? Suk Wai has a unique niche in the Straits Times in that she is a person interested in books and in big ideas. Yeah. So, Wright, thank you for joining us. I was very pleased when Marcus wrote to me and asked whether I could contribute the foreword for this book. My wife has not read the foreword to the book. So I'm going to abuse the occasion by reading my foreword to my wife. I begin by thanking Nadia, Marcus, and Keith for inviting me to contribute the foreword for this timely book. And I call the book timely because in 2 years from now, 2019, we will be commemorating the 200th anniversary of the founding of Singapore by the British. I do not use the word celebrate because in the forum page of the Straits Times, a Singapore citizen had said to be conquered by the British is not an event to be celebrated. Such a neutral word, commemorate. On that important occasion, I hope we will rescue William Farquhar from the shadow of history and honor him in an appropriate way. It is never easy to be number two, whether number two child in a family, number two person in an embassy, in a company, in a government. Because very often number one would delegate to number two all the heavy lifting and yet claim credit for the accomplishments of the number two. And if the number two dares to outshine number one, you know what happened to Anwar Ibrahim. I'm not here to revise Singapore history. I'm not a revisionist, and I join my fellow citizens in celebrating Stamford Raffles. I think we should give him credit for founding Singapore. We also give him credit for his vision that Singapore will be a free port, that Singapore will welcome talented men and women from all over the world to live, to work, and to settle in Singapore. These are two very important legacies from Raffles: free port, free trade, multiculturalism. And I will always acknowledge Singapore's debt to Raffles for this vision and the legacy of these three core values. What I want to do this evening is to briefly say that while we in Singapore perhaps over-celebrate Stamford Raffles, we have neglected the important contributions that William Farquhar made to Singapore. And here I apologize to those of you who are ardent fans of Raffles. I want to point out that between 1819, when Raffles landed in Singapore, and his departure from Bencoolen, he had spent a total of 38 days before his second return in 1824. So in the first 4 years of Singapore, all the hard work was done by William Farquhar. And it was a great pity that Raffles and Farquhar did not get on. And in 1824, Raffles dismissed him as resident and commandant. And because the two men quarreled, there was not a proper acknowledgement of the respective contributions of Raffles and Farquhar to the success of Singapore. And we owe it to Nadia to provide us with an accurate historical account of what Farquhar did for Singapore. Farquhar, like Raffles, learned the Malay language. He was a fluent Malay speaker. He understood Malay culture and Malay custom. And he was for 15 years the British resident and commandant of Malacca, during which time he earned for himself a great reputation as a fair person. And because of this reputation and goodwill, many of the traders in Malacca followed him when he left Malacca to come to Singapore. And because of his great reputation, the Bugis, for example, also came to Singapore. And other traders from other nationalities gravitated to Singapore because of Farquhar's reputation. So in these many ways, Nadia, you have reminded us in Singapore of the very important contribution that William Farquhar made in the first 4 years of Singapore. And thank you, Nadia, for writing this book. Maybe you would consider writing a 4th book. And the 4th book, I would like you to consider writing it the first 10 years of Singapore, 1819 to 1829. Thank you very much.